All right, welcome everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Good morning. Good whatever it is where you are. And welcome to our wildcard announcement and our question and answer session. We're really excited to have this opportunity to talk to all of you and come at you live from over the internet and share this kind of debrief of our regional events with each and every one of you. So I see we have a large number of people who are hopping into the chat right now. And we have close to 100 folks watching this live, which is awesome to see you all here. What we're going to do is have a good portion of the session dedicated to questions and answers from you, the audience. So what I'd encourage you all to do as we get started, start queuing up your questions in the chat, and we'll have Meredith help moderate that and get those questions to us so that we can answer them in real time. So with that said, I'm Tom. I have been helping run CPTC since it started, and you've probably seen me at the regional events at several of the events over the past several years, and especially this year I had the opportunity to go to the New England region and see many of you there. Meredith?
Hi everyone, I'm Meredith. I'm one of the other CPTC directors for monitoring and people and various sorts of shenanigans, and I believe you saw me at the New England region and Great Lakes.
Awesome, thanks Meredith. Austin, the man behind the infra.
Yeah, thanks Tom. Hi everyone, my name is Austin. I've been with CPTC since Dino Bank, and I am, as Tom said, the Director of Infrastructure.
Awesome. Great to have you here, Austin, as well. And Stuart, the world innocent.
Hey, I'm Stuart. I've been volunteering for a while now, and I run the world and OSINT team. So I create the stuff that you Google and find on the internet, and a lot of the characters and stuff like that.
Yeah, and fun fact: both Meredith and Stuart were previous CPTC competitors, so they had the opportunity to do that. Austin, I don't think you were, right? Nope, you got to join later. CPTC didn't exist when I was in college, so I didn't get that, but nothing wrong with that. So our schedule for today, we're going to go through some upcoming dates and reminders of what's going to be happening for CPTC. Then we're going to have the Q&A with our development team, and that's all of us here, and we have some feedback that we can pull in from other groups that aren't at the session right now as well. Then we're going to share with you the at-large event results for our at-large competition that happened. That was the remote regional event 2 weekends ago. Last weekend, I don't even remember. Time just kind of merges together at this point. It was sometime in the recent past. And then what we're going to do is share the wildcard winners, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to see as well. And that is all the teams that didn't place first at a region, but we have 9 spots that we're going to give to teams to give them the chance to compete at finals at RIT. So without further ado, I first want to take a moment to thank our global sponsors and everyone who makes CPTC happening. I do see one question though. First, are we doing Q&A before results? Yes, we are doing Q&A. So we want to make sure we all have questions and you share that because there's so many things that we can learn by doing that. So first and foremost, we owe a big shout out to IBM Security, who has been our premier sponsor since CPTC has started. CPTC began with an idea that happened in 2015, and we've been building this event ever since with their support. And one of the things I really love about IBM's support is they give us the opportunity to build this event how we want to do it. We put together what we as organizers think are important, what lessons we want to teach you as students, and that gives us the chance to really have the opportunity to control the event with IBM's financial support. And we thank them very much for giving us that autonomy and the dollars to make this event happen. So anytime you see someone from IBM and talk about CPTC, make sure you let them know how much this competition means to you, because that's what helps us make this thing still happen every single year. Next, we have a lot of other companies that give us either time, dollars, people, some combination of all of those in order to make this happen. We have their logos on the screen. I like to call out silver sponsor Paperclip for their support. And then all of these other companies here are sharing people. So myself and Meredith, we're from Hurricane Labs. We have people from SRA, Security Risk Advisors, Salesforce, Eventive, Collabs, Global Atlantic Financial Group, RIT's Cybersecurity Institute, the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Crow, and many, many other organizations that dedicate their time and effort to make this event happen. So we thank them a lot for their support as well. Also, I want to thank our regional hosts. These are the schools that offered their space, their people, their talent, their time, and their infrastructure in order to give you all a place to compete. And this year, for the first time since 2019, we had many in-person regionals, and we want to thank these schools for being able to host those events. So we had Concordia University out of Canada, Stanford University in California, Augusta University in Georgia, University of New Haven in Connecticut, RIT Dubai in Dubai, Tennessee Tech, probably in Tennessee. Meredith, you're going to have to give me the name on the other university. I'm going to butcher that. So,
Al Aliyah Amman University.
yes, thank you. They are also in Jordan, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. So we had two hosts outside the United States besides Canada. I guess Canada is also outside the United States. So 3 hosts outside the United States. And then Baldwin Wallace University in Ohio.
Also outside the United States.
I might disagree with you there, but we'll go with it. So thank you to all of these regional hosts for making these events happen. We've been working with many of these universities for years, especially Augusta University, Stanford, New Haven, and Dubai, RIT Dubai, and Tennessee Tech. They've all been returning universities, but it's so great to also see new universities come in and fill those spots as well. So we can't guarantee we're always going to have the same regional hosts, but when you find good regional hosts, we love it when they keep coming back. But it is a ton of effort. It costs them money to make these things happen. So without their support, they really couldn't make those things happen. Okay, now let's move on to some of the content for this session. So important dates. There's a couple things I want to call out because it's going to be relevant to everyone listening. The feedback release we're going to do. So as we were going through this event, you produced things for us to look at. Those could be pen test reports. There were findings that you released. You had interactions with us. You responded to injects. Every time that we are working with you on something like that, we are recording feedback and giving you details about how we assess that. That is something that we put into the scoring system, the scoring.cp.tc site that you logged in to register your team. And we're going to make those scores available to you overnight. So basically, just in a couple hours, 6 hours or less, at December 1st, 12:01 a.m. Eastern time, that feedback is going to be available. You'll be able to see not only the scores that you got on different parts of the assessment, but also, more importantly, the written feedback that you got from our graders. A couple things to keep in mind for this. The feedback that is given to you is the raw data that comes from everyone who looked at your report. We don't just have one person looking at these things. We have a team of industry professionals who are doing that. And because of that, you might see some differences in how things are shared with you. This could mean some person who looks at your report might really like something, and someone else might find that to be maybe not their favorite part of the report. So you might see some feedback that looks a little bit conflicting. This is by design, and it is realistic because different people are going to view reports differently. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the feedback. They're coming from a number of different individuals, and they have different thoughts about what they see. And that is probably the biggest question that we get regarding feedback. Meredith, can you think of any other thing around feedback that we see in the past that might be worth sharing with the students?
No, I believe you pretty much covered everything.
Excellent. Okay, next. After this event, we're going to know all 15 teams that are going to be invited to compete at finals. This is the 6 regional winners and 9 wildcard teams that we'll be announcing at the end of the stream. What we will need from every team that is invited is confirmation that they intend to compete in finals. This is going to be due for all teams December 7th at effectively midnight Eastern time. We need that in order to make sure we can arrange for travel make sure hotel arrangements are in place, and everything we need to get you physically there to the final event. If a team doesn't submit this in time, you risk forfeiting your spot, and we'll offer it to another team that is able to do that. So keep that in mind. We want to make sure that no one misses out on that opportunity. I realize that's a pretty quick turnaround. It's about a week from now, but there's not a lot of time with the folks at RIT to get all the travel arrangements worked out. And that is a massive undertaking. And we definitely thank the team there to make this happen. I know I wouldn't want to do that myself, all that planning. Finally, finals. Keep these dates in mind. January 13th through 15th, 2023. That's going to be hosted at RIT's Global Cybersecurity Institute in Rochester, New York. And I'm hoping to see a ton of you there in person. Okay. So with that said, I think we're at a good spot where we can move on to the Q&A session of this, or section of this session. So Meredith, have we have questions queued up at this point?
As of right now, we only have one. So
excellent.
I think this is a perfect question for
I'm happy to see
Austin.
that, but we need more.
Huh?
One is better than zero, so we'll start with that, and we'll keep the questions coming.
All right, we have a question from Jonathan, and Jonathan asks, and this will be for Austin, what is SSH?
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. If this is a serious question, I'd first say Google it. But my second answer would be for someone who is completely new to the field, it's okay to ask these questions. And SSH, if you don't know what it is Secure Shell. It is a port 22 TCP protocol that you can use to connect to devices over the network.
And one of the things about SSH is it's better than Telnet, because if someone is in the middle of that connection, they can't see everything that you're typing.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking at traffic over a network and you see in your in-map scans, you see Telnet open, one of the things you can do is spin up Wireshark, start to listen to that traffic over Telnet. You'll see all the connection strings and everything because Telnet is unencrypted. SSH is Secure Shell, so it's in the name and it is encrypted.
And one of the things that we might say as competition organizers, let's say you do an assessment of a CPTC environment and you see a host that has Telnet open. That could be a finding where a recommendation would be you want to implement SSH. That said, you also want to see what is allowed to have SSH opened. You don't want to necessarily have like guest users at the hotel being able to SSH into anything, because that's bad. So that could be a case of a finding as well that you might see in an environment. So that's definitely, I'm not sure if that was the intent of the question, but you know, we like to make everything educational if we can here.
All right, thank you. The next question is for Tom, and Elmo asks, what if visas are not acquired on time?
Got it. I'm assuming this is going to be a question for one of the international teams that may have the opportunity to compete. We actually, for the international teams, we have already started the visa process by sending letters to try to go ahead and get that expedited. Obviously, we have no guarantee for making that happen, but it is our goal to have the international teams be on site at RIT if at all possible. If that doesn't work, we will try to figure out what we can do to accommodate that. But we definitely want to have all teams that are international that are in the running for that to really make an effort to be able to have that acquired. So that would be the goal there.
The next question is, will there be a specific score number given to us in the feedback, as well as a breakdown of how the score was calculated?
So Meredith, I think you might have the most insight into how that's displayed to the teams in the scoring system.
I do?
Maybe? I don't know.
Cool, I'll take that.
Cool.
Yes, I do believe there will be a number given out, as well as the written feedback for every single inject interaction, and then, of course, your report as well that is given to you once feedback is released at 12:01 a.m. tomorrow. So as Tom said, in just about 6 hours from now. If I am incorrect about the specific number, I do apologize, but I do believe you will see at least your inject scores.
What I would encourage you, though, is the written feedback is really where we try to give the most value. The number by itself, sure, it's a number, and that ultimately comes down to how teams are ranked. But the most valuable educational component is going to be the scores or the written feedback from our members as well. And somehow I'm full screen, and I'm not sure how that happened.
Oh, I'm playing around.
Okay.
The next question is, how cold is it going to be in the competition?
Okay, I think we might need some clarification on that. Do we mean the competition environment, the rooms, or just Rochester in general in January? So I can take this a number of different ways. I know, Austin, you're in Texas usually, and Stuart, you're in California, and Meredith and I are both in Ohio. So from a climate perspective, Meredith and I are both more qualified to talk about it being cold outside than either of you. So I will take that, I guess. And I guess I was also an RIT student, so I have some experience with that. But so I will say it depends. So the labs at RIT are kept at a comfortable, normal indoor room temperature. So regardless of what climate you're familiar with, it should be fairly comfortable. I will note that a lot of the building rooms there are on a central climate system, so it is pretty much difficult to control one room individually. From a weather perspective, though, Rochester is close to Lake Ontario and close to Canada. It does get cold, and we can't guarantee that there would be things like snow. You'll have less snow than Buffalo had, for example, a couple weeks ago when they had like snow taller than me on the ground. Not something that you often see with Rochester, but it can happen. So I would expect if you are traveling, dress to expect weather where it's going to be cold outside, like around freezing 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit is pretty common. It may be colder than that. I have a video I made in college where I took boiling water off the stove and threw it in the air when it was -2 outside. That's what happens sometimes in Rochester in the winter. So keep aware of that. That said, it's also been known to be in the 50s, 60s, or 70s sometimes because weather is weird. So it just depends on what is going to happen. And obviously, you could look at the weather forecast right before you leave, and it'll be wrong when you show up. So unfortunately, that is something you can't necessarily control.
Great. This next question is from Little Nemo, and they ask, how does CPTC ensure teams do not cheat during the competition?
That is a really good question. And I think probably, Meredith, you and I can tag team some of that.
Sure.
But we can also talk to, like, Stuart, I think you can throw in some feedback too based on some of the things you saw at the regions you were at as well. But one of the things that we try to do with CPTC is monitor as much of the things that happen in the environment as possible. So like everything that happens in your VDI environment, we're collecting data on, and anything that is happening within the competition environment as well, we are collecting data on. That's all done via Splunk, and we get that data into a central instance where basically we have a single pane of glass where we can see everything that's happening in every system in the environment in real time. And then from there, we use Splunk as a correlation engine to not only look for things that are potential issues, but also monitor things that are happening. So one of the things that we try to do is recruit a bunch of people who previously competed and have them think about things that they wanted to do that might have been rule violations during the event, and have them build searches to identify those sorts of things. And as a former competitor, Meredith, I think you can talk a lot more about that.
Yeah. And as both a former competitor and member of the monitoring team, looking at all of the data and things that we did as competitors to try and whether it was exploit the environment or work with what we had to do what we wanted to do, we realized that some of the activity that we do is particularly shady in nature, even for a pen testing competition, that when doing your everyday, day-to-day office work would be something like data exfiltration or an insider threat scenario. So we also like to build monitoring for rules around that in the context of the competition would be competition integrity, but looking as a whole is just suspicious activity that you would see out in the real world when somebody is trying to do something that they shouldn't be.
Yeah, and a lot of the monitoring that we put in place is based along the lines of what might a large organization or an actual company want to be able to detect in their environment. And some of that we use to actually respond to you during the event, like a customer. So like, just as an example, let's say you as a pen tester wanted to try to crack passwords. And instead of maybe identifying a user, you run it against the entire domain and lock out every user. I've seen this happen during actual pen tests, and customers don't like it when that happens. So we want to use the monitoring data that we collect within the competition environment to make that realistic experience. So we can come to you and say, hey, why did you lock all these accounts out? And we can actually get all of that information from the event as well. Stuart, is there anything you think that's worth adding along the lines of that competition integrity and that based on what you've seen?
Yeah, given that we have a very robust monitoring in place, it's always recommended to own up to your mistakes, or if you do anything to modify the client environment, or accidentally fat finger a IP address that's an external IP address, or really do anything that is going to upset your client. It's always better to notify the client than to have them look at their monitoring stack and notify you. So that's the feedback I give on that.
And we get that, like, you're humans, you make mistakes. You can easily typo 100 instead of a 10 dot, for example, when you're doing an Nmap scan. That's a mistake. It's understandable. That's just something that you make a mistake, just tell your customer and say, hey, I did a problem here. I shouldn't have done this. No big deal. Rather than the customer saying, oh, someone was scanning something on the internet and now we have a cease and desist from their ISP. So those are the sort of things that we can identify really, really quickly. And there's no sense in saying we didn't do that, because we have probably at least 5 or 6 data points of what happened when something like that occurs.
Right. This next question is for Stuart, and they ask, how are teams selected? Is it based on the severity of bugs found or the reports?
Yeah, so we put quite a bit of effort across a very wide volunteer base into scoring. So we score, there's multiple kind of pillars of scoring. So that's professionalism, your interaction scoring with your client, as well as your reporting and technical findings. And so your overall score is a aggregate of all those different factors, and each of those categories is broken down. I mean, there's likely upwards of 500 different elements that you're scored on, and each of those factor into your final score. And what's amazing is, we don't, like in school, you get an A, B, C, D, F, or whatever, it's 70% or above. So we really try and ensure that there's distinction in the scores that we give. And so it's pretty interesting seeing, despite the fact that, it's just as often to get a 1 or a 2 as it is a 10, that we see the difference in teams is very, very close, even given those 500 categories. Oftentimes the difference between, first and fifth is 1 or 2 things. And the same with, 5th through 10th. So a lot of it goes into it. And so, for example, you could be the best team in the world and, technically, and just absolutely destroy the infrastructure. But if you can't articulate those findings to your client, right, then you're not providing value for your client. And so the same is true in CPTC. Oftentimes the teams that succeed are not just strong technically, but they are able to articulate, their findings in a manner that resonates with the client and is specific to their business, and while also maintaining professionalism throughout the entire competition. So I'd say it's just as equal, or it's equally important to be strong technically as it is to have good report writing skills, as it is to, you know, have good soft skills for when you're interacting with your client.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize the speaking to the business of the customer as a really important point because, you know, hotel is going to have different requirements than, say, other companies we've had in the past, like a hospital or a manufacturer or a utility. And adjusting the report, executive summary, and other things to match that customer's needs are really what help reports stand out.
Right. Next question is from Dr. Andy Green, and he asked if we would please speak to any broad trends we saw in the reports, both good and bad. So I don't know how you all would like to field this one, but I know I have a few thoughts.
I think, Austin, did you do some of the technical scoring as well?
Yep, I did. And I think this is a really good question. Generally, when we're reviewing 60 report, so we do see some trends. One of the trends I saw personally is I saw a lot of teams, you know, attack the hotel infrastructure, and it's their first pen test, and they got domain ad really easily. And they kind of just stopped there. They got domain admin once, and then that was the results of all their findings. You know, as a client from a hotel perspective, one of the things I think would be really important is my customer, protecting my customer. If you can get domain admin, yeah, that's really bad. But how else can you get domain admin? There are more than one way. Can you get access to my customer databases? There's so many other questions I would ask from a pen tester other than, did you get domain admin? That would be important for me. The other things I saw that was really good is I love that starting to see a lot more teams use the reports that we put out from prior year final teams. And you can really see teams that started out in this competition their first year and the growth that those teams have gone through over a 3-year span or 2-year span. And their reports are night and day better. So what does that look like? It breaks down the finding, vulnerability, proof of the vulnerability, the risk of the vulnerability, and really speaks to the client of why they need a fix. Weak password, for example.
I do love to see the growth over time. Stuart, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say some of the kind of positive and negative trends that I observed is, you know, it's kind of piggybacking on what Austin was saying. It's obvious that a lot of teams are using templates that they generated, you know, prior to the actual technical portion of the engagement. And it was also obvious that many teams were adding content to their report during the engagement. And so that, you know, allows those teams more time after the, you know, access to the environment has closed to kind of iterate on their report and, you know, just provide additional context and business risk, et cetera. So I think teams that did that, or quite a few teams appear to have done that this year. Some interesting trends that I noticed also were there's quite a few teams that chose to include such things as like the OWASP top 10 in all of its glory with all of the details on like page 5 of their report, and you know, 7 pages of different frameworks and stuff. And that's nice, but it definitely diminishes the readability of your report. I think there is a place for that in your report, but maybe not in the middle of your executive summary. So that was an interesting trend. And then, like, I know this is like a reverse trend, but what was pretty interesting too was the amount of different things that people chose to include in their appendix was very interesting. I don't think really many teams had the same content in there. So that was pretty interesting as well. And personally, I'd recommend putting all the information I described in the appendix, but I'm sure other people have different opinions.
Yeah, Meredith, you had some thoughts too.
Yeah, and one of mine is a bit of a weird one, but as somebody who spends a lot of time reviewing pen test reports, one of the things I saw the teams doing this year was trending away from either using a traditional table of contents or having a table of contents with page numbers. And if you have a very large report that you're giving to a client and you're sending it to them digitally, as is the primary means of sending things nowadays, make sure that you have a table of contents that has page numbers so they aren't sitting there scrolling up and down or hunting through for specific words in your document if they're looking for a particular section, whether that be the vulnerability breakdown, the executive summary, because they may need to hand portions of that report off to different teams. So knowing, okay, it's somewhere within this range is a little bit helpful, but calling out the page numbers is always really critical as well. And then I believe we did get a bit of interesting, just an overall note from our technical scoring team who said that across all of the team's reports, there were 88 unique vulnerabilities that were called out within those reports. There were multiple vulnerabilities that multiple teams found, of course, but there were 88 unique ones.
So if you had less than 88 in your report, you still have more to find.
And there's more than 88 vulns.
Yeah, so the list doesn't include things like everything that exists. And that's one of the things that makes this fun, because there are things you might find that we don't even necessarily know are vulnerabilities, and we have to confirm it in the environment. And that happens multiple times every event.
All right, next question is from Jacob. Jacob asks, are there plans to release censored reports that teams wrote to qualify for the global finals, as opposed to only the reports they wrote during global finals this year?
Yeah, so this is something I'd love to be able to do. And we are collecting the reports with basically the modifiable versions in Word doc format or Google Doc that we had you all submit. The idea there is to make it easier for us to go through and try to redact those. It is a big effort on our side to go through that, but I do want to try to get to the point where we can release almost all of the reports that we get leading up to the event. Obviously, after global finals, but to give you an idea of a wider spectrum of what gets submitted so you can see what reports look like. It is not a small effort, though, because we basically have to do a 3-level peer review of those documents to make sure we're not missing information. And even then, I'm sure there's things that we can overlook, because it is hard to go through hundreds of thousands of pages of report looking for information. So that's one thing. Like in the future, if you're interested in volunteering and help us redact reports after you graduate, we would love to have help with that too, because these sorts of things to provide information to the teams to help you all get better, it's a lot of work, but it's something that we just need to be able to try to do. So any help we can get is always helpful for that too.
Yes, we'd also love volunteers who are interested in doing more than just redacting reports as well.
Yes, absolutely. That is not the primary thing we want you all to do. Just small components of things.
All right, this next question is from Ken. And Ken asks, what are some of the more frequently used tools in the competition other than Nmap?
I think we give that to Austin and Stuart.
Stuart, you want to go first?
One of the most frequently used tools that we see run in our competition is Derb. We wish it wasn't run as frequently. In fact, we probably wish it was never run. Oftentimes, what we find is that our consulting teams will run Derb on a resource and then ask us why the resource is down. And we look and they're sending 10,000 requests a second at that resource. So I would say, and I'm giving away a lot here, but Derb usually we find hurts teams more than it helps them. So yeah, I imagine that Derb and Hydra account for the majority of the traffic across the competition environment.
The thing I would say, especially echoing around that, is if you run one of those tools that can have an impact in the environment like that, and then something stops working, and then you come to us and say something stopped working and we didn't do anything, we don't like that. So that is a kind of a pro tip from a professionalism. You run a command, you break something, that happens sometimes, but be honest about it, please. Austin, your turn.
Yeah, Derby's definitely one of the fun ones. The other ones I actually see quite a bit, that is more recent, past, I don't know, 3 years, is Crack Mac Exec or CME. I've seen a lot of Medusa as well for password guessing or password spraying. Tater is another one that people use for password spraying. There's actually, it's very interesting every year. One of the great things about volunteering is I get to see, or our team gets to see the different tools that each of the teams are using. And actually, if you submit a GitHub review prior to the competition, you can use some of those tools in your environment. And we always see new ones every single year, which is awesome.
I think I've also been on calls where you all are doing grading and someone discovers a tool that they've never seen before that someone includes in a report, and we're like, hey, this is pretty cool. And then we learn about stuff too by doing that.
Yeah, the other big ones, obviously Metasploit, Certsploit. We see a lot of password attacks, especially this year. But the number one command we see run is always ls. So, yeah.
Then, hold on. I'm actually looking at the data right now.
It's probably ls, and then ls-l is the second most popular command.
Oh, no, shoot. I stand corrected. It is still ls, followed by nmap, cd, cat, ssh. Yeah, those are your top 5.
Yeah. So an interesting thing, which Meredith, I think you were kind of hinting towards here, is for the first time ever this year, for the major, like we saw, ls has always historically been the biggest one, and LSTD or whatever. We saw nmap being run. Yeah, exactly. We saw nmap being run like actually typed in as opposed to as part of some like enumeration framework. Run quite a bit, to the point that I think in a lot of the regions it was actually the most run command until then, towards the end of the competition.
Yeah, I believe you're correct, and my staring at Splunk right now supports your statement. All right, next question is for Tom, from Tom. What are the vaccine requirements for on-site teams? I have a team member who is unable to receive a vaccine, but they can be tested prior to arrival in Rochester and provide those results.
Yeah, so that's a great question. It is something that we are still working through with as a team, and we actually had a pretty long discussion with our internal group and some of the health and safety people at RIT. So we haven't made a final decision on there. I will say we are leaning towards being pretty, pretty controlled about how we do that, in a way where we're going to focus on testing and masks as being controls to try to create as safe of an environment as we can. We haven't made any final decisions about vaccines and all that, but we are close to having a typed up plan that we want to promulgate to the teams after we get approved by the various people involved. So that's something we've been working on for the past several weeks to try to figure out what that's going to look like. We don't have an official decision yet. Nothing I'm saying right now is official, but we will communicate that to teams as soon as we can, because we know there is the commitment to travel that's coming up.
Thank you, Tom. Next question is from Dylan, and Dylan asks, will the presentations from last year be uploaded before finals?
So that is a good question. We might be able to do the slide deck for those. I'd have to see if we can get those redacted in a way that makes sense. We may not be able to do that. I don't think the recording that we had in the cyber range worked the way that we expected to, which we were hoping to upload full, streamed of the people actually presenting in the room. I think the recording didn't work the way we wanted to, so that option isn't there, unfortunately. But it is our goal to at least try to record them again this year to include those in the future. But slide decks, I think we should be able to try to do. I can make a note of that to see if we can get those redacted in time and posted, so at least you have an idea of what people's slide decks look like. Hopefully that'd help a little bit. I'd rather share information, try to be helpful, as opposed to not have it just giving you nothing to go by.
Next question is from the Bacon Nation. I love your name. Will we get to see the detailed scores of other teams to know how far apart each team was at our regional?
So that information isn't something we really release through the scoring system. You'll know, obviously, the first top 3 teams that finish at your event, but we don't list all of the detailed scores for other teams, just as a matter of, I'm sure you can figure it out. You all are pen testers, but we, as organizers, we don't hold a ton of value in the number itself. It's more the written feedback that we want you to focus on.
Just because you're pen testers, the scoring server is still out of scope. Do not go attack it.
Yes, scope is very important. That is one of the number one educational opportunities that we have coming out of this event. Stuart, you can probably speak about scope too and what you see sometimes at the events.
Yeah, so we've noticed that historically our consulting teams have struggled quite a bit with scope. As you're all aware, we included a pre-inject that was a scoping call, and we asked competitors to fill out a scoping questionnaire so that they could refer back to that during the actual engagement. Ensuring that you fully understand the scope and stay within the scope of an engagement is really, really important. And that might not be really covered in your classes or even in online resources. But violating scope is the number one way that you can ensure that your consulting company will not be hired by your client again. So it's really important to fully understand the scope. And if you have any questions or need a clarification, reaching out to your client and asking for it. Nobody ever got fired for asking questions about scope. So, yeah.
And I would encourage you to also keep in mind things that look like they're involved with the event, but aren't explicitly in your scope. So as an example for that, there are things that exist on the internet that are related to CPTC. That might even be the name of the customer. They might be a website. If that's not in the scope that you're provided, it's not in scope. And you can be pretty certain that the same type of visibility and tooling that we have within the competition environment, we also run on things on the internet that host websites for us. So when you're there's nothing wrong with doing OSINT in the case where you go to a customer's website, but running a DERB against the customer's website, not recommended, especially if it's before you have a contract and that's out of scope. You're basically trying to break into a system that you have no permission to access. So don't do that, please.
All right, so speaking of the phishing inject, this next question is from, I can't read, Sad Road, and Sad Road asks, for the phishing attack, were we supposed to receive valid credentials? In short, yes. If you gave us a page that followed the text of the inject and what we requested, we put credentials in that page.
The couple things I noticed when we were testing this, some teams didn't have things that were accessible over the internet and didn't resolve in DNS, didn't have an IP address that was publicly accessible. We couldn't get to it. So that would be a reason you wouldn't get credentials via the phishing attack. But basically, if there was an email that came through, we clicked on it and we put in credentials like a user would do if it was a phishing attack. So if your thing worked, you should have gotten good credentials. If the email didn't come through for some reason, then that wouldn't happen.
All right, next question is for Austin. Austin asks, can you speak to how broad you would like to see each finding be in the report?
Yeah, so if you find 100 weak passwords, I don't want a list of all of the 100 weak passwords. I want a general case of, here's what we found and here's why it's an issue. Similarly, if you find customer data in a database, I don't want 10 pages of the drop tables to see now social security number, first name, last name, payment. I'd rather just want to know, hey, what access did you get? What's the severity of it? And prove to me that you got that access.
All right, next question is from Lil Nemo. Lil Nemo asked, was there a favorite phishing attack that you saw? For me, the one that cloned the company website and looked very similar was my personal favorite. They also had something interesting on the site where it looked just slightly off in the logo as well, so that was very nice to see.
I saw one I really liked that was basically a clone of a third-party service, and it looked really legitimate and had a domain. Definitely was something that if I didn't know I was looking at a phishing attack, it really looked like something that I would click on and log in, and even worked once I logged in with credentials. So like everything was there. It totally made me think as an as a person accessing a link, like, hey, this is something that's a good service.
All right, next question is from Robert. Robert asks, how many points would a team lose in nationals if during their presentation they were over 5 minutes late and ran over time?
So what we do for presentations at finals are you're given a 10-minute timer, an alarm goes off at 10 minutes, and you're dragged out of the room. Not actually dragged, but you are done presenting. So if you don't get to parts of the presentation, you don't get points for those. It depends on how you pace your presentation then. So if we give you a time limit, it may be 10 minutes. I don't know exactly what we're going to do this year, but you got to stick to that. Otherwise, you just won't have the ability to do that. And it definitely feels awkward when you're in the middle of like your fourth to last slide and you just didn't get to some of the big parts of your presentation.
All right, and we have come to our last question before we get on to the awards. Last question is from Elmo, and Elmo asks, did you see a huge skill and quality disparity across regions, or was it pretty similar?
So Meredith, I think you've looked at some more of the data for that than I have. Maybe you can give a quick overview of some of that, what we see. I know it does vary.
Yeah, I mean, it does truly vary. Looking at the region specifically, there is a mixture from every region. Every team that we see has a different skill level, has a different team composition. So there isn't a true skill or quality disparity as we're looking at reports across the regions themselves. It really does come down to the specific team, which is why we have Wildcard and the at-large region, where it doesn't tie you geographically for wildcarding in. Everybody has the same chance to get to global finals at the end of the day.
And I think that we will see some of this in the wildcard announcements, but I think there were some surprises and also a lot of new teams that we're seeing at global finals this year, which is awesome.
So before we move on, Tom and team, any final thoughts?
I would say I don't really have a lot. We covered a lot in the Q&A of the thoughts I'd like to bring up. So I know people are dying to get to the award stuff, unless Stuart, Austin, or you have any other things you want to bring up.
No, I think great interaction overall this year during regionals. And if you have any more questions, feel free to post them in the Discord, or I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
And
as
we will keep a
love
list.
the feedback. Go ahead, Meredith. Sorry.
I was going to say, and we will keep a list of all of your questions after finals. We can answer any questions that you may have after that, after the NDA expires. All right, so that being said, Tom, I will hand it back over to you.
Okay, cool. So the first thing we're going to do is the at-large events placement awards. So these are going to be the first, second, and third place for the teams that competed in the at-large event. So this is the region that was hosted virtually at your university. You weren't physically there. And we had 15 teams that competed at the same time as our mega regional on the 19th of November. So we want to give these teams their first, second, and third ranking. The one thing to call out here, the first place team here is not guaranteed a spot at finals like the other regions had, because we wanted to give some incentive to the regional hosts that offered their time and effort and dollars to make those events happen. So keep that in mind, but otherwise, that is the only real caveat for this. So third place for the at-large regional is going to go to Carnegie Mellon University. So congratulations to them for winning third place in the at-large event. And then second place that is going to go to Brigham Young University. Congratulations to them for finishing second in the at-large event. And finally, the first place winner. And once again, first place not guaranteed a spot at finals, but if they placed well enough, they may end up there. That is going to be California State University Fullerton. So congratulations to them for taking first place. Next, let's move on to just recapping our regional winners. These are the teams you know and love already making an appearance at finals, but they took first place at the physical regional and are guaranteed a spot at finals. So those ones for our Western regional, we have California Poly Pomona, Princess Samaya University for Technology in the UAE, RIT in the Great Lakes region, University of Tulsa in Central, University of Central Florida in Southeastern, and University of Massachusetts Amherst in New England. So each of these teams placed first. They're guaranteed a spot. And that is the 6 teams that are going to make it or have already made it. We have 15 teams for finals. Those extra 9 spots are going to be what we announce now for the wildcard teams. So that is the thing you've all been waiting for. So without further ado, let's fire away. And I think we can do these one at a time. Meredith, you want to start?
Sure. All right, so the first team going to wildcard is maybe American University of Sharjah.
Congratulations. Stuart.
Brigham Young University.
Austin, you're next.
California State University Fullerton.
Fourth team, Indiana Institute of Technology.
Fifth team is Liberty University.
RIT Dubai.
Stanford University.
University of Texas at Austin. Excellent. Congratulations to all of these teams. And we are going to have a great field for our final event. One of the things that's really awesome here, we actually have a total of 3 teams from outside the U.S., all in the UAE region, who are going to be at finals. So this is an awesome thing to see, where we have our international partners here being part of this event as well. And we're thrilled to welcome them all to Rochester as well. So we're looking forward to seeing so many of you in just about a month or so. The teams that are on this list and the other teams that have qualified by winning first, you'll get communication from us with details about what we need from you to be able to make travel happen. With that all said, I think that we can call this a wrap for tonight, unless any of you have anything you'd like to add.
Nothing else
Congrats
from me.
to all of our finalists.
Absolutely. Congratulations to everyone. And thank you all so much for your time and participation. We had some great questions, and I love seeing that feedback and getting the opportunity to interact with all of you in as real life as we can do here. So we'll see some of you in Rochester. If you see us other places, reach out, say hi. And with that said, we can close this out for tonight. Have a good evening, everyone, and thank you.